She scratched his luxury car in the rain. Panicked, broke, she left a sorry note and tried to run. What she didn't know, he was city's most feared mafia boss. And instead of revenge, he wanted her. The thunder cracked like a gunshot over Chicago, and Layla Martinez knew this night was going to end badly. She just didn't know how badly. Rain hammered against her delivery bike helmet as she squinted at her phone's cracked screen. $3.47 in tips after 8 hours of racing through the storm. The math was brutal. She needed at least $50 tonight to avoid getting another threatening notice from her landlord. One more delivery, she whispered, her breath fogging inside her helmet. Just one more. The GPS led her into the warehouse district, where streetlights were more suggestion than reality. Her bike's headlight cut through the darkness like a dying flashlight, illuminating nothing but rain and shadows. The address seemed wrong. Who ordered pizza to a place like this? She turned into what looked like an alley, following the blue on her screen. The narrow passage was so dark she could barely see 3 feet ahead. Something felt wrong, but Layla had learned long ago that when you're broke, you don't get to trust your instincts. You just survive. That's when she saw it. A sleek black car materialized from the shadows like something from a nightmare, parked sideways, blocking half the alley. She yanked her handlebars hard right, but the rain had turned the asphalt into an ice rink. Her bike skidded sideways, and she heard the sickening scrape of metal against metal. The sound echoed through the alley like a scream. Layla's heart stopped. She stumbled off her bike, rushing to the car's side where a 3-inch scratch now marred the perfect black paint. Even in the dim light, she could tell this wasn't just any car. This was the kind of vehicle that cost more than most people's houses. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," she muttered, pulling out her phone to use as a flashlight. The scratch looked even worse up close, cutting through what appeared to be a custom paint job. Her hands shook as she grabbed a napkin from her delivery bag and scribbled a note. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for repairs. Please call me, Layla." She added her number and tucked it under the windshield wiper. She was turning to leave when she heard footsteps echoing through the alley. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. "Leaving so soon?" The voice was smooth as whiskey and twice as dangerous. Layla spun around to face a man emerging from the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through her soul. His expensive suit looked completely out of place in the grimy alley, yet somehow he belonged to this darkness. Behind him, 3 other men in suits appeared from nowhere, blocking every possible escape route. "I left a note," Layla said, surprised her voice didn't shake. "I'll pay for the damage." The man walked toward his car with the confidence of someone who owned the world. He ran his fingers along the scratch like he was examining a wound, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of an accent, Italian maybe. "An expensive mistake." A smile ghosted across his lips. "A 2023 Lamborghini Huracan. Custom everything. This scratch just cost you about 6 figures." The number hit her like a physical blow. 6 figures. She didn't have $600, let alone 6 figures. Her knees nearly buckled, but something inside her, the same stubborn streak that had gotten her through 3 jobs and college classes, kept her standing. "Then I guess I'll be paying it off for the rest of my life," she said, lifting her chin. "But I'll pay it." That's when something shifted in his eyes. The coldness flickered, replaced by something that looked almost like interest. "Most people who damage my property beg," he said, stepping closer. "Or run. You're doing neither. Begging won't fix your car, and running won't solve my problem." He laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound was more unsettling than his anger would have been. "What's your name?" "Layla Martinez." "I'm Damian Rossi." He said it like she should recognize it, and the way his men straightened at the name told her she probably should. "And you, Layla Martinez, have just done something remarkable. Scratched your car?" "Survived it." His eyes never left hers. "You see, most people who cross me don't get to walk away and discuss payment plans. But he paused, studying her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. You're different. Rain continued to pour around them, but Layla barely felt it anymore. Something in his tone made her skin crawl and her heart race at the same time. Different how? You didn't grovel. You didn't cry. You looked me in the eye and told me you'd pay a debt that could destroy your entire life. He stepped even closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. That kind of fire is rare. Fire doesn't pay for car repairs. No, he agreed, his smile turning predatory. But it does something much more interesting. Before she could ask what he meant, he nodded to his men. Take her. Wait, what? Layla backed away, but there was nowhere to go. I said I'd pay for the car. Oh, you will, Damien said, walking back toward the shadows. But not with money. Strong hands grabbed her arms before she could run. She struggled, but it was like fighting against mountains. Let me go. You can't just. Miss Martinez, Damien's voice cut through her panic like a blade. If you can scratch my car and survive, you belong to me now. The last thing she saw before they pulled a hood over her head was a smile, cold, possessive, and somehow hungry. Then everything went dark, and Layla realized her night had just gotten infinitely worse than she'd imagined. As they dragged her away, she heard him say to someone, "Take her to the mansion, and make sure she's comfortable. She's going to be staying with us for a very long time." The thunder crashed again, but this time it sounded less like a warning and more like a door slamming shut on the life she used to know. Layla woke up on silk sheets. The realization hit her before she even opened her eyes. The fabric was too smooth, too expensive, nothing like the worn cotton sheets in her tiny studio apartment. Her head throbbed, and when she tried to move, every muscle in her body screamed in protest. She bolted upright, her heart hammering as memories flooded back. The alley, the scratch, Damien Rossi's predatory smile, the hood over her head. The room around her was like something out of a movie. Massive windows draped in heavy curtains, antique furniture that probably cost more than her college tuition, and a chandelier that threw prismatic light across cream-colored walls. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. You're awake. Layla spun toward the voice and found Damien leaning against the doorframe, still in that perfect suit despite whatever time it was. He looked completely relaxed, like kidnapping college students was just another Tuesday for him. Let me go. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Right now. Good morning to you too, he said, stepping into the room. In the daylight streaming through the windows, she could see him more clearly. Sharp cheekbones, eyes that seemed to catch every detail, and a scar that ran along his left temple. How did you sleep? How did I? She stared at him in disbelief. You kidnapped me. You can't just. I can do whatever I want, Layla. His voice was calm, matter of fact. This is my world, and in my world, I make the rules. She scrambled off the bed, putting distance between them. This is insane. You can't keep me here over a car scratch. This isn't about the car anymore. He moved closer, and she noticed he walked with the fluid grace of a predator. This is about you. Me? You don't even know me. I know enough. His eyes traveled over her face like he was memorizing every detail. I know you work 3 jobs to pay for school. I know your father left when you were 12 and your mother died 2 years ago. I know you're 1 semester away from graduating with a degree in social work because you want to help people. The blood drained from her face. How do you? I make it my business to know everything about people who interest me. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, masculine, dangerous. And you, Layla Martinez, interest me very much. Before she could respond, a knock echoed through the room. Come in, Damien called without taking his eyes off her. A man entered who was the complete opposite of Damien's controlled elegance. Tall, broad, with cold blue eyes and a face that looked like it had seen too many fights. He glanced at Layla with open disgust. This is Victor Kane, my right-hand man, Damien said. Victor, meet Layla. Victor's lips curled into something that might have been a smile on anyone else but looked like a threat on him. The girl who scratched the boss's car, his voice carried a slight southern drawl. You're causing quite a stir. Victor thinks you're a liability, Damien said conversationally. He believes I should have handled this differently. The way Victor's hand moved toward his jacket made it clear what differently meant. Layla's knees went weak. But I told him, Damien continued, that you're under my protection now. Aren't you, Layla? It wasn't really a question. I want to go home. This is your home now. Damien's tone was gentle, but there was steel underneath. You're safe here, but you're not free. Do you understand the difference? Safe from what? Victor and Damien exchanged a look that made her stomach drop. From people who would use you to hurt me, Damien said finally. The moment you entered my world, you became a target. I didn't enter your world. I scratched your car by accident. Accidents have consequences. He reached out and touched her cheek, and she was horrified by the way her skin tingled at the contact. Sometimes beautiful ones. She jerked away from his touch. You're insane. Probably, he smiled, and for a moment, he looked almost boyish. Maria will bring you breakfast. I suggest you eat. You'll need your strength. For what? For adjusting to your new life. He headed toward the door, Victor following. Oh, and Layla? Don't try to leave. For your own safety. The door closed with a soft click, and she heard the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. Layla ran to the windows, pushing aside the heavy curtains. The view took her breath away. Manicured gardens stretched for acres, surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire. She was 3 stories up with no fire escape in sight. But as she studied the grounds, something else caught her attention. A black SUV parked just outside the main gate, and another one across the street. Men in dark clothing stood near them, watching the mansion with the patience of hunters. Her blood ran cold. Damien had said she was a target now. Were those his enemies? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Martinez? A woman's voice, gentle and accented. I have breakfast for you. A middle-aged Latina woman entered, carrying a silver tray. She had kind eyes and worry lines around them. I'm Maria, she said, setting the tray on a small table. I manage the household. Maria, please, Layla rushed to her. You have to help me. I don't belong here. Maria's expression grew sad. Child, I wish I could. But Mr. Rossi, when he decides something, that's how it is. Best you can do is try to understand him. Understand him? He kidnapped me. He also saved your life, Maria said quietly. Those men outside? They've been watching for 2 days. If you were still in your apartment, she shuddered. Mr. Rossi has enemies. Dangerous ones. After Maria left, Layla sat on the bed, her mind racing. 2 days. She'd been unconscious for 2 days? And there were people watching the mansion, people who apparently wanted to hurt her to get to Damien. She thought about her tiny apartment, her delivery job, her normal life that now seemed like a dream. Then she looked around the luxurious prison where she'd apparently become a pawn in some deadly game she didn't understand. One thing was certain, she had to find a way out of this before it got her killed. Across the city, in a penthouse that rivaled Damien's mansion in luxury but surpassed it in coldness, Marco Valenti studied the photographs spread across his marble desk. Each image showed the same thing, Damien Rossi's heavily guarded compound, and a young woman with dark hair visible through an upstairs window. You're certain it's her? Marco asked, his voice carrying the faint rasp of a lifelong smoker. Unlike Damien's refined appearance, Marco looked like what he was, a street fighter who'd clawed his way to the top through brutality and cunning. Scars marked his hands, and his nose had been broken so many times it sat crooked on his face. Positive, boss Tony Ricci, his lieutenant, pointed to the clearest photo. Layla Martinez. 22, college student, nobody special. But Rossi's got her locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Marco's laugh was like broken glass. Nobody special, huh? He picked up one of the photos, studying Layla's face. Then why is the great Damien Rossi acting like a lovesick fool? For 15 years, Marco had been waiting for this moment, waiting for Damien to show weakness. Their families had been at war since their father's generation, a bloody feud over territory and respect that had cost both sides countless lives and millions of dollars. But Damien had always been untouchable, protected by his cold intelligence and the loyalty of his men. Until now. This girl changes everything, Marco continued, setting down the photo with deliberate care. For the first time in his life, Damien Rossi has something to lose. What do you want us to do, boss? Marco stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. Somewhere out there, Damien was probably planning his next move, unaware that his greatest weakness was already exposed. We're going to take her, Marco said simply. And when we do, Damien will come running. That's when we end this war once and for all. It won't be easy. He's tripled security since she arrived. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Marco turned back to his desk, his eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. But every fortress has a weakness. We just need to find his. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Layla was discovering that being a prisoner in a gilded cage had its own unique form of torture. It had been 3 days since she'd woken up in Damien's world, and the luxury was beginning to feel suffocating. She'd tried everything. Picking the lock, it was electronic. Breaking the windows, bulletproof. Even attempting to scale down the ivy outside her room. The drop would have killed her. Every escape route led to the same conclusion. She wasn't leaving unless Damien wanted her to. But what bothered her most wasn't the captivity itself. It was the way her body betrayed her whenever he was near. The way her heart raced when he brought her dinner personally, or how her skin burned when his fingers accidentally brushed hers. It was sick, twisted, and completely against everything she believed in. She was pacing her room when voices drifted up from the hallway. One was Damien's, and the other belonged to Victor. She pressed her ear to the door, straining to listen. Surveillance footage from 3 locations, Victor was saying. Marco's men have been watching us for days. Let them watch. Damien's voice was ice cold. They won't get close enough to matter. Boss, with respect, this isn't about getting close. This is about her. Victor's contempt was clear even through the door. The girls made you soft. Every family in Chicago can see it. Watch your tone, Victor. Someone has to say it. You've turned this place into a fortress over some random college girl. Marco's already putting the word out, says you've finally found something worth dying for. There was a long pause that made Layla's blood run cold. Maybe I have, Damien said finally. Double the guard rotations. I want eyes on every approach to this property. And Victor, if anything happens to her, I'll hold you personally responsible. And if this war costs us everything, if Marco uses her to destroy everything we've built, then that's my choice to make. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, moving away from her door. Layla stepped back, her hands shaking. A war. She was causing a war between 2 crime families, and people were going to die because she'd scratched a car. The weight of it hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. How many people would get hurt because of her? How many families would lose fathers, sons, brothers? An hour later, Damien appeared in her doorway with dinner. He looked tired, stress lines etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. You look pale, he observed, setting the tray on her table. Maria made your favorite chicken parmesan. How do you know what my favorite is? I make it my business to know. He sat across from her, studying her face with those intense dark eyes. What's wrong? For a moment, she considered lying, but the guilt was eating her alive. I heard you talking to Victor, she said quietly. About Marco Valenti. About the war. Damien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What did you hear? Enough, she stood, pacing to the window. People are going to get hurt because of me. Because you won't let me go. People get hurt in my world regardless, he said, his voice carefully neutral. This changes nothing. Liar, she whirled to face him. Victor's right, isn't he? I've made you weak. I've made you vulnerable. Damien was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. You've made me human, he said. For the first time in my life, I have something I can't bear to lose. The confession hung between them like a loaded gun. Layla stared at him, seeing not the cold Mafia boss who'd kidnapped her, but a man who looked lost and desperate and completely out of his depth. "Then let me go," she whispered. "End this before someone dies." "I can't," he stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace. "I won't, even if it destroys you." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin with devastating gentleness. Even then, as he left her alone with her guilt and growing, unwanted feelings, Layla realized the truth that terrified her most. She was starting to understand him. And worse, she was starting to care what happened to him too. The plan came to Layla at 3 a.m. while she lay staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep for the third night in a row. She couldn't stop the war, but she could remove herself from the equation. If she wasn't here, Marco would have no leverage over Damien. People would stop dying because of her. It was Maria who made it possible. "You look tired, Mija," the older woman said the next morning as she brought breakfast. Her kind eyes were filled with worry. "This life, it's not meant for someone like you." "Maria," Layla said carefully, "if someone wanted to leave this place, hypothetically, how would they do it?" Maria's face went pale. "Miss Layla, you can't be thinking. People are going to die because of me. I heard Damien and Victor talking about a war. How many families will lose someone because I'm here?" Maria set down the tray with shaking hands. "Mr. Rossi, he's not a bad man. Not in his heart. But his world," she shook her head. "It consumes everything it touches. Then help me leave before it consumes me too." For a long moment, Maria stared at her with conflicted eyes. Then she sighed deeply. "The laundry truck comes every Tuesday at 2 p.m. The guards barely check it because it's been the same driver for 5 years. But child, if you're caught." "I won't be. Mr. Rossi will be furious. Not just at you, at everyone who let this happen. Then make sure you're not working when it happens. Take the afternoon off. Go visit your sister, like you've been wanting to." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You're asking me to betray a man who's protected my family for 10 years. I'm asking you to save lives." Layla reached for the woman's hands. "Please." Tuesday came with a storm threatening on the horizon. Layla had spent the morning acting normal, eating breakfast, reading in the library, even engaging in polite conversation when Damien stopped by to check on her. She hated how easily the lies came, how natural it felt to smile while planning her escape. At 1:45 p.m., she made her move. The hallways were quieter than usual. Maria had apparently convinced several other staff members to take the afternoon off with her. Layla slipped from her room and made her way toward the service corridors she'd memorized during her captivity. Her heart hammered as she reached the laundry room. Through the small window, she could see the truck pulling up to the service entrance. The driver, a burly man in his 50s, was already unloading fresh linens. Layla waited until he disappeared inside, then slipped out the back door and into the truck. She buried herself under a pile of dirty sheets, the smell of industrial detergent burning her nostrils. Minutes felt like hours as she listened to boxes being loaded around her. Finally, the engine started. The truck rolled forward, and Layla allowed herself a moment of hope. She was actually doing it. She was escaping. In 20 minutes, she'd be far enough away to call the police, to disappear back into her normal life. The truck stopped. Voices outside, angry, urgent. The back doors flew open, and hands reached in, tearing away the sheets that hid her. Well, a voice said, gravelly and cold. "What do we have here?" Layla found herself staring into the scarred face of Marco Valeni. Behind him stood 4 men with guns drawn, all wearing expressions of predatory satisfaction. "Layla Martinez," Marco continued, hauling her from the truck. "Damien's little pet. You just made this very easy for us." Terror flooded through her. "I don't know what you want, but—" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I want." Marco's grip on her arm was painful enough to leave bruises. "You're going to help me send a message to your boyfriend. They were dragging her toward a black SUV when the shooting started. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Damien's men appeared from behind cars, buildings, shadows, as if they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Marco cursed, pushing Layla behind the truck as bullets sparked off metal around them. "Kill them all," Marco shouted to his men. "But keep the girl alive." The battle was brief, but vicious. Layla pressed herself against the truck's wheel, covering her ears against the deafening sound of automatic weapons. She could hear men shouting, screaming, dying. Then suddenly silence. "Layla." She looked up to see Damien running toward her, his face a mask of cold fury she'd never seen before. Blood spattered his white shirt, and he held a smoking gun in his right hand. Behind him, Victor and 6 other men were zip-tying the few surviving members of Marco's crew. Marco himself lay motionless near the SUV, his eyes staring sightlessly at the gray sky. "Are you hurt?" Damien's hands were on her, checking for injuries with desperate thoroughness. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," she managed to say. "Damien, I'm—" Then his arms were around her, crushing her against his chest with a desperation that took her breath away. She could feel his heart hammering against her ribs, could feel the tremor in his hands as he buried his face in her hair. "You could have been killed," he whispered, his voice raw. "They could have taken you, hurt you, and I would never have found you." The reality hit her then, not just that she'd nearly been kidnapped, but that Damien had been following her. That this had all been a trap, with her as the bait. "You knew," she said, pushing against his chest. "You knew I was going to try to escape." His arms didn't loosen. "I've known since Sunday. Maria came to me Sunday night, told me about your conversation." Betrayal and rage flooded through her. "You used me as bait. You let me walk into an ambush. I protected you," he said fiercely. "I made sure you were never in real danger." "Never in real danger?" She shoved him hard enough that he had to release her. There were bullets flying everywhere. "Marco could have killed me."
"Marco's dead."
"His threat is over." Damien reached for her again, but she backed away. "You're safe now." "Safe? I'm your prisoner. I'm trapped here because you're too obsessed to let me live my own life." Her voice cracked with fury and desperation. "I hate you. I hate this place, and I hate what you've done to me." Something flickered in Damien's eyes. Hurt, maybe, or understanding. But when he spoke, his voice was steel. "Then hate me," he said quietly. "Hate me all you want. But you're never leaving my protection again. Even if I have to protect you from yourself." As his men loaded her back into an armored car, Layla realized with sick certainty that her failed escape had only made things worse. She'd shown Damien exactly how far she was willing to go to leave him. Now he'd make sure she never got another chance. For 3 days after the ambush, Layla didn't speak to anyone. She sat by her window, staring out at the grounds that had become both her sanctuary and her prison. Maria brought meals that went untouched. Victor checked on security with cold efficiency. And Damien kept his distance, though she could feel his presence like a shadow at the edge of her awareness. The grief hit her in waves, not just for her lost freedom, but for the life she'd planned, the future that had been stolen from her. She was supposed to graduate in 2 months, supposed to start her internship at the community center, supposed to help kids who'd grown up like she had. Instead, she was trapped in a world of violence and obsession, watching the rain streak down bulletproof windows. On the 4th day, Damien finally came to her. "You need to eat," he said quietly, settling into the chair across from her untouched breakfast. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, stubble shadowing his jaw. For the first time since she'd known him, his perfect composure seemed cracked. "Why?" she asked without turning from the window. "So I'll have the strength to be your prisoner? So you'll have the strength to live?" Something in his tone made her look at him. The cold mask was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like concern? Regret. "I know you hate me," he continued. "And maybe you should. But hate me alive, not dead." She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold onto the fury that had sustained her for days. But sitting there looking at him, she felt something crack inside her chest. "I had plans," she whispered. "I was going to work with kids who grew up in foster care like I did. Kids who needed someone to believe in them." Tears she'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. "Now what am I? Just another casualty of your world." Damien was quiet for a long moment. "Show me," he said finally. "What?" "Your plans. Show me what you wanted to do." She stared at him, confused. "Why would you?" "Because I want to understand." He leaned forward, and she was startled by the sincerity in his dark eyes. "Show me who you were before you met me." An hour later, Layla found herself in Damien's study, surrounded by computers and files she probably wasn't supposed to see. She'd pulled up the website for Sunshine Children's Home, the orphanage where she'd been planning to do her internship. "This is it," she said, pointing to pictures of smiling children on the screen. "They serve kids who've aged out of foster care, help them transition to independence. I was going to run their mentorship program." Damien studied the screen with intense focus. "Tell me about it." Despite herself, Layla felt her passion returning as she explained her ideas: support groups, job training, college prep. As she talked, she noticed Damien making notes on a legal pad, his expression thoughtful. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Research." He set down his pen and looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Come with me tomorrow. I want to show you something." The next morning, they drove through Chicago's South Side in an unmarked car, Victor following at a discreet distance. Layla watched the familiar neighborhoods blur past, places that reminded her of her own childhood, where hope was a luxury most couldn't afford. They stopped at a nondescript brick building with a simple sign: St. Catherine's Home for Children. "Why are we here?" Layla asked as Damien led her up the front steps. "You'll see." Inside, chaos ruled. Dozens of children aged 5 to 17 filled every available space, doing homework, playing games, arguing over television channels. The walls were painted in bright colors, but the furniture showed its age, and several windows were boarded up. "Mr. Ross." A woman in her 60s hurried over, her face lighting up. "We weren't expecting you today." Layla noticed she called him Ross, not Rossi. "Sister Margaret, I'd like you to meet Layla Martinez. She's a friend who's interested in youth services." As Sister Margaret gave them a tour, Layla began to understand. The new computer lab, donated anonymously last year. The renovated kitchen, funded by a private benefactor, the college scholarship fund that had sent 12 kids to university. "Your mysterious donor has been a godsend," Sister Margaret was saying. "Without his support, we would have closed 2 years ago." Damien remained silent, but Layla saw the way his eyes softened when the children ran up to greet him. How a little girl with pigtails hugged his legs without fear. How he crouched down to listen to a teenage boy explain his science project with patient attention. On the drive back, Layla stared at him with new eyes. "How long?" she asked. "How long what? How long have you been supporting that place?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. 8 years. "Why?" For several blocks, he didn't answer. Then, quietly, "Because I used to be one of those kids." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. That night, Damien found her on the mansion's balcony, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the stars. He approached slowly, like she might bolt if he moved too fast. "You don't have to tell me," she said without looking at him, "about your childhood." "Maybe I want to." He settled against the railing beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. "My parents died when I was 7. Car accident, or so I was told. I spent 5 years bouncing between foster homes and group facilities." "What happened when you were 12? His smile was bitter. "Vincent Rossi found me. Took me in, gave me his name. Said he saw potential in a kid who'd learn not to trust anyone. He wasn't your real father. He was the only father I knew. He taught me that power was the only thing that kept you safe. That if you let people close, they'd either leave you or use your feelings against you." Damien turned to face her fully. He was right about most things. But maybe not everything. The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Layla found herself studying the sharp lines of his face in the moonlight, remembering how he'd held her after the ambush, how his hands had shaken with fear for her safety. "You're not what I expected," she admitted softly. "What did you expect?" "A monster." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. But monsters don't run secret charities. They don't remember that a little girl likes her pancakes shaped like butterflies. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Maybe I am a monster. Maybe I'm just a monster who wants to be better for you." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Without thinking, she stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. He reached up, cupping her face with hands that could kill but touched her like she was made of spun glass. "Layla," he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. She should pull away, should remember that he was her captor, that he'd stolen her life and her choices. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the boy who'd learned not to trust anyone, the man who hid his kindness behind ruthless efficiency. She saw someone as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. The moment stretched between them, full of possibilities and dangers she wasn't ready to name. Then a phone buzzed, breaking the spell. Damien stepped back, the cold mask sliding back into place as he answered. "What is it, Victor?" Layla couldn't hear the words, but she saw Damien's expression harden. "I'll be right there," he said, ending the call. He looked at her with something that might have been regret. "I have to go. Business." As he walked away, leaving her alone on the balcony, Layla pressed her fingers to her lips and wondered when everything had become so complicated. She still wanted her freedom, would always want it. But now she wanted something else too, something that terrified her more than any cage. She wanted to understand the man who'd stolen her heart along with her liberty. Victor Kane stood in the shadows of the parking garage, his phone pressed to his ear as rain drummed against the concrete above. On the other end of the line, a voice with a thick Brooklyn accent was giving him instructions he'd never thought he'd follow. "You sure about this, Kane?" Tony Ricci, Marco's former lieutenant, asked. "Once we move, there's no going back." Victor's jaw clenched. "I'm sure." Damien's lost his edge. That girl has made him weak, reckless. If this continues, we'll all be dead within a year. And you think betraying him will save your organization? I think removing the distraction will save what's left of the man I've followed for 10 years. Victor watched rainwater cascade down the garage's entrance. Marco had it right. She's his weakness. But Marco was too impatient, too sloppy. "So, what are you proposing?" "You take the girl. Clean, quiet. Make it look like an outside job." Victor's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. "Once she's gone, Damien will remember who he really is. And if he comes after us, he won't know it was me. I'll help him hunt for her, feed him false leads. By the time he realizes the truth, it'll be too late to matter." Tony was quiet for a moment. "You're asking me to start a war with one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. I'm asking you to help me save him from himself." After ending the call, Victor sat in his car for a long time, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He'd been Damien's right hand for a decade, had pulled him out of more firefights than he could count. But the past month had changed everything. Damien was making emotional decisions, taking unnecessary risks, turning their operation into a fortress centered around protecting one insignificant girl. It had to end. 2 floors above the garage, Damien stared out his office window, a strange unease settling in his chest. Something felt wrong, not wrong enough to identify, but present like a low-frequency hum at the edge of his consciousness. He'd just finished reviewing security reports when Victor knocked on his door. "Come in." Victor entered with his usual military bearing, but something in his posture seemed different. More rigid, more formal. "Boss, I think we should consider moving the girl," Victor said without preamble. "My sources say there's still chatter on the streets. Marco's people haven't all been accounted for." Damien turned from the window. "What kind of chatter?" "Nothing specific," but Victor shrugged. Call it instinct. This place has been her home for too long. Patterns make targets. For a moment, Damien studied his oldest friend's face. Victor was right, they'd gotten comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. And Damien's feelings for Layla had definitely clouded his judgment about security protocols. Where would you suggest? The safe house in Lake Forest. Remote, secure, only 3 of us know its location. Damien nodded slowly. Set it up. We move her tomorrow night. Already done. Transport will be ready at 2,200 hours. After Victor left, Damien couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Victor had been pushing to move Layla for weeks, but tonight felt different. More urgent. More final. He made a mental note to review the security footage from the past few days. The attack came at 2:15 a.m. Layla jolted awake to the sound of automatic gunfire echoing through the mansion. Emergency lights bathed her room in red, and she could hear men shouting orders in the hallways below. Her door burst open, and Damien appeared, hair disheveled, shirt partially unbuttoned, gun in hand. We need to go. Now he grabbed her arm, pulling her from the bed. There's been a breach. What's happening? Marco's people. More than we expected, he was already moving toward the window, scanning the grounds below. They're inside the perimeter. Explosions shook the building, and plaster rained from the ceiling. Through her window, Layla could see muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. This way, Damien led her toward a hidden panel in the wall she'd never noticed. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading down. Emergency exit. It leads to the garage. They'd made it halfway down when the lights went out completely. In the darkness, Damien's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. Stay close. Whatever happens, don't let go. They emerged into the garage to find chaos. Bodies of Damien's men lay scattered across the concrete, and the air was thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Victor stood near the exit with 5 men Layla didn't recognize, all pointing weapons at them. Victor? Damien's voice was barely a whisper, disbelief and betrayal warring in his tone. I'm sorry, boss. Victor's face was a mask of grim determination. But you left me no choice. You son of a... Damien raised his weapon, but one of the intruders fired first. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a concrete pillar. Damien! Layla screamed, trying to run to him, but strong hands grabbed her arms. No permanent damage, Victor ordered the shooter. He needs to live with this. Damien struggled to his feet, blood streaming down his arm, his face twisted with rage and pain. You think this will save me? You think taking her will make me stronger? I think it will remind you who you really are, Victor nodded to his men. Take her. Victor, please. Layla fought against her captors, but they were too strong. You don't understand. This won't help him. This will destroy him. Maybe, Victor said quietly. But it'll also save what's left of our organization. As they dragged her toward a waiting van, Layla heard Damien roar her name with the fury of a wounded animal. The sound echoed through the garage like a promise of vengeance, and she knew that whatever Victor thought he was accomplishing, he'd just signed all their death warrants. The van doors slammed shut, cutting off her view of Damien, trying desperately to crawl toward her despite his wounds. As they drove away from the burning mansion, Layla realized she wasn't crying for her lost freedom anymore. She was crying because she'd finally understood what Damien meant to her, just in time to lose him. In the smoking ruins of his garage, Damien Rossi knelt in a pool of his own blood and made a promise that would shake Chicago to its foundations. Victor thought he'd save their organization by removing a distraction. Instead, he'd just unleashed something far more dangerous than a man in love. He'd created a man with nothing left to lose. The warehouse smelled like rust and fear. Layla had been tied to a chair in the center of the cavernous space for what felt like hours, her wrists raw from the rope and her head pounding from whatever they'd used to keep her unconscious during transport. Tony Ricci paced in front of her like a caged animal, his scarred face twisted with frustration. The remaining members of Marco's crew lounged around the warehouse, but their casual postures didn't hide the tension in their eyes. They all knew what was coming. "He's going to find me," Layla said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "And when he does, you're all dead." Tony stopped pacing and backhanded her across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the warehouse, and blood trickled from her split lip. "Your boyfriend ain't coming for you, princess," Tony snarled. "He's probably bleeding out in that fancy mansion of his." "You don't know Damien," Layla met his eyes without flinching. "Hurting me won't make him weak. It'll make him unstoppable. We'll see about that." But even as Tony tried to project confidence, Layla could see doubt creeping into his expression. Reports had been filtering in all morning, Damien's men hitting every known Ricci safe house, every ally who'd ever done business with Marco's organization. Bodies were piling up across the city, and each death brought Damien closer to this warehouse. 3 hours later, the first explosion shook the building. Damien moved through the warehouse district like death itself, leaving a trail of bodies and burning buildings in his wake. His shoulder was on fire where the bullet had torn through muscle, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony of knowing Layla was somewhere in this maze of concrete and steel, afraid and alone. He'd already hit 6 locations, extracting information from anyone who might know where Tony had taken her. Some talked immediately. Others required persuasion. None of them survived to regret their association with Marco's crew. The 7th warehouse sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by rusted shipping containers and abandoned cars. It looked empty, unremarkable, which made it perfect for hiding someone. Damien studied the building through his scope, from 3 blocks away. 2 guards at the main entrance, at least 1 sniper on the roof, probably more inside. A fortress, but not an impregnable one. He'd brought 12 men, everyone he could trust after Victor's betrayal. They moved like ghosts through the industrial wasteland, positioning themselves around the warehouse with military precision. "Alpha team in position," came the voice in his earpiece. "Bravo team ready." Charlie team locked and loaded. Damien checked his weapons one final time, 2 pistols, a tactical shotgun, and enough ammunition to start a small war. Which he supposed was exactly what this was. "Light it up," he ordered. The assault began with controlled explosions that blew out the warehouse's windows and plunged the interior into chaos. Smoke grenades followed, filling the space with thick gray clouds that turned visibility to 0. Layla heard Tony shouting orders, heard his men scrambling for positions, heard the distinctive sound of weapons being readied for battle. But through it all, she found herself smiling. He'd come for her, just like she'd known he would. The gunfight that followed was brief, but vicious. Damien's men were professionals, disciplined and coordinated. Tony's crew were street thugs, dangerous but undisciplined. The outcome was never really in doubt. When the smoke began to clear, Damien appeared through the haze like an avenging angel. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with smoke and blood, but his eyes burned with cold fury as they found her across the warehouse. "Let her go, Ricci," he called out, his voice echoing through the space. Tony emerged from behind a shipping container, holding a gun to the back of another man's head, one of Damien's soldiers who'd been caught in the crossfire. "I don't think so," Tony replied. "You want her? You're gonna have to go through me, and everyone I got left. If that's what it takes." What happened next was like watching a force of nature unleashed. Damien moved with inhuman speed and precision, his weapons becoming extensions of his will. He flowed through the warehouse like water, adapting to every obstacle, every threat. One by one, Tony's remaining men fell. Some tried to run. Some tried to fight. None of them made it to the exits. Finally, it was just Damien and Tony, facing each other across the warehouse floor while Layla watched from her chair, still bound but no longer afraid. "You did this to yourself," Tony said, desperation creeping into his voice. "You chose some nobody girl over your own organization. Over loyalty." "I chose love over fear," Damien replied, his gun trained steady on Tony's chest. And you chose the wrong side of a war you couldn't win. She'll never be safe. There'll always be someone else, someone who sees her as your weakness. Damien's smile was colder than winter. Let them come. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Tony crumpled to the concrete, his eyes already glassy with death. Damien holstered his weapon and ran to Layla, his hands shaking as he untied her bonds. The moment she was free, she threw her arms around his neck, ignoring the blood and smoke and violence that surrounded them. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered against her hair, his voice raw with emotion. "Never," she whispered back, feeling tears she didn't remember shedding streak down her cheeks. "I'm not going anywhere." As sirens began to wail in the distance, Damien lifted Layla in his arms and carried her toward the warehouse entrance. Behind them lay the bodies of everyone who'd tried to tear them apart. Ahead lay an uncertain future, but they would face it together. "What happens now?" Layla asked as they walked into the Chicago sunlight. Damien looked down at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, his smile was completely unguarded. "Now," he said, "we go home." But as they drove away from the warehouse district, both of them knew that the real question wasn't what happened now. It was what happened next, and whether the love they'd found in the darkness could survive in the light. The safe house in Lake Forest was nothing like Damien's mansion, just a modest two-story home on a quiet street where neighbors minded their own business and asked no questions. Layla sat curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching Damien pace the living room like a caged animal. He'd barely spoken during the 3-hour drive from Chicago, his jaw clenched with the kind of tension that came from holding back words that might change everything. Now, in the safety of 4 walls and bulletproof windows, those words were fighting to get out. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, stopping in front of the fireplace. His back was to her, shoulders rigid with whatever he was about to confess. "About Victor?" "About everything." He turned around, and Layla was shocked by what she saw. The cold, controlled mask was gone completely, replaced by raw vulnerability that made him look younger, more human. "About why I really kept you." Her heart clenched. "Damien. No, let me say this. You deserve the truth." He sat on the coffee table directly in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching. "That first night, when you scratched my car, I could have let you go. Could have taken your insurance information and forgotten you ever existed. Then why didn't you? Because for 30 seconds, you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a boss. Not someone to fear or obey or use. Just a person." His voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Layla reached for his hands, but he pulled back. "I told myself I was protecting you, that keeping you close was the only way to keep you safe from my enemies. But that was a lie." He stood up, beginning to pace again. "I kept you because I was selfish, because losing you felt like dying." "Damien, Victor was right about one thing. I did become weak. I started making decisions based on fear instead of logic. Fear of losing you. Fear of what would happen if you left." He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "I turned you into a prisoner because I was too much of a coward to ask you to stay." The words hit her like physical blows. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "I never gave you a choice," he continued. "Real choice. And that's not love. That's possession." Layla felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she didn't know if they were from sadness or relief or something else entirely. "So, I'm giving you one now." Damien walked to a table by the window and picked up a set of car keys and an envelope. "There's a car in the garage. Clean plates, full tank. The envelope has cash and a new identity, driver's license, social security card, passport. Everything you need to disappear." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're free." The words seemed to tear something inside him. "You can walk out that door and never see me again. Go back to school, get your degree, help those kids you wanted to help. Live the life you planned before I destroyed it. And you?" His smile was heartbreaking. "I'll make sure no one ever comes after you. I have enough enemies to keep me busy without creating new ones." Layla stared at the keys in his outstretched hand, her mind reeling. This was what she'd wanted from the beginning, her freedom, her life back, the chance to choose her own path. All she had to do was take the keys and walk away. "What if I don't want to go?" she whispered. "Then you're not thinking clearly." His voice was gentle but firm. "Layla, my world is violence and death and constant danger. You've seen what happens to people who get close to me. Is that really the life you want?" She thought about the warehouse, about Victor's betrayal, about the bodies scattered across Chicago because of her. She thought about the fear and the blood and the constant knowledge that tomorrow might not come. Then she thought about the orphanage, about Damien crouching down to listen to a child's science project. She thought about his hands shaking when he held her after the ambush, about the way he'd said her name like a prayer on the balcony. "You're right," she said, and watched his face crumble. "Your world is dangerous and violent and terrible." She stood up, walking toward him with purpose. "But it's also where you are," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And you're the man who sees potential in throwaway kids. Who remembers that I like my pancakes shaped like butterflies. Who was willing to start a war to get me back." "Layla, I spent my whole life being invisible," she said, now standing directly in front of him. "Foster families who never really saw me, teachers who wrote me off, a world that taught me I wasn't worth fighting for. But you looked at me and saw something worth dying for." She took the keys from his hand, and for a moment his eyes filled with hope. Then she set them on the table behind him. "I don't want safe," she said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I don't want easy. I want you. You don't know what you're saying. I'm saying I choose this. I choose you. I choose us," she smiled through her tears. "Not because you made me, not because I'm afraid to leave, but because this is where I belong." When he kissed her, it was like coming home and starting an adventure all at the same time. His arms came around her with desperate reverence, holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Because she was. "We can't go back to the way things were," he said against her lips. "If you stay, if we do this, you're my partner in everything. Equal choices, equal risks, equal say in what happens next. Promise." "I swear it on my life." As they held each other in the quiet safety of the safe house, both of them knew the road ahead would be anything but safe. There would be new enemies, new challenges, new dangers around every corner. But they would face them together. A broken boy who'd learned to love, and a lost girl who'd found her home in the most unlikely place. And sometimes that was enough to change the world,